The slap echoed across the training yard. Conversations stopped. A hammer fell silent at the forge. Two young warriors paused in the middle of a sparring match. Even the pack dogs resting beneath the shade of the barracks lifted their heads. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody stepped forward. A red mark slowly appeared on Celeste Ashwin's cheek. For a moment, the entire yard watched her, waiting. Some expected tears, others expected anger. A few hoped for once she would finally fight back. Instead, Celeste bent down and picked an apple off the ground. The young Omega servant beside her looked close to fainting. The girl could not have been older than 16. Her hands shook as she tried to gather the rest of the scattered fruit. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The apology wasn't meant for Celeste. It was meant for Vivian. Everything in Iron Vale was. "It's all right," Celeste said quietly. She placed the apple back into the basket. The servant stared at her. A handprint was still visible on Celeste's face. "It was an accident." The girl swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to drop it." "I know," Celeste offered a small smile. It wasn't a brave smile. It wasn't a sad smile. Just a tired one. The kind that came from having the same day too many times. Across from them, Vivian Ashwin folded her arms. Golden curls fell over one shoulder. Her cream-colored dress looked as though it belonged at a royal gathering rather than a dusty training yard. People noticed Vivian wherever she went. She had grown up expecting them to. "You embarrassed me." Her voice carried easily across the yard. Celeste continued gathering apples. "You frightened her," she replied. Vivian laughed. The sound held no humor. "She dropped fruit all over my dress." The servant girl's face turned white. A small stain marked the edge of Vivian's sleeve. Most people would not have noticed it. Vivian had. She noticed everything that touched her, everything except the damage she caused. "You were about to punish her over a stain." Celeste stood and handed the basket back to the girl. The servant looked between the sisters before hurrying away. Relief flooded her face. Fear followed close behind. She knew the trouble was not over. Vivian watched the girl leave. Then she turned her attention back to Celeste. That was always the problem. When Vivian lost one target, she found another. "You think you're better than everyone." Several nearby warriors suddenly became very interested in cleaning their weapons. An older maid lowered her eyes. No one wanted to be caught watching. Celeste sighed. "You know that's not true." "No?" Vivian took a step closer. "Then why do people always look at you like that?" Celeste frowned. "Like what?" "Like you're the victim." A strange silence settled over the yard. Vivian's eyes flashed. Beautiful eyes. Cold eyes. Eyes that always seemed to be searching for something just out of reach. "You do it without trying," she said. "You make everyone feel sorry for you." Celeste stared at her. For a moment, she saw something beneath the anger. Not cruelty. Not this time. Something else. Something wounded. Then it disappeared. Buried beneath pride. "I don't want anyone's pity," Vivian scoffed. "Of course you don't." The words dripped with disbelief. "You've spent your entire life collecting it." A few people shifted uncomfortably. Even by Iron Vale standards, that was harsh. But nobody challenged Vivian. She was the Alpha's favorite. Everyone knew it. Some admitted it. Most didn't. Vivian had been born shining. Celeste had been born useful. Iron Vale valued both, but never equally. "You should go inside," Celeste said. "The preparations still aren't finished." That only made things worse. Vivian's face hardened. There it was again. That calm, that patience, that refusal to fight. It drove her mad, because every argument ended the same way. Vivian shouting, Celeste enduring, and somehow people always blamed Vivian afterward. The realization only fed her anger. She hated being watched when she wasn't winning. Vivian smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "You act like you're above all this." Her gaze swept over the training yard. The pack. The people. The life they lived. "You pretend none of it matters." "It matters. Then why don't you ever fight for yourself?" The question landed harder than the slap. For the first time, something flickered across Celeste's face. Not anger, not shame, just surprise. Because beneath all the shouting and insults, that sounded like a real question. Vivian wanted an answer. Celeste looked away, toward the mountains in the distance, toward anywhere but her sister. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. "I'm tired." The yard had gone completely silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. Celeste rarely spoke about herself. Most people had never heard her complain, never heard her explain, never heard her admit weakness. She looked back at her sister. "Tired of fighting people who already decided who I am." The words hung in the air. Simple, honest, painful. Then came footsteps. Fast. Urgent. The spell broke. A young warrior rushed into the yard carrying a sealed scroll. "Alpha Cedric!" he shouted. "Message from the Obsidian Crown." The entire yard froze. Every conversation died. Every head turned. Even Vivian forgot her anger. Messages from the Obsidian Crown rarely reached Ironvale, and when they did, they changed things. The warrior disappeared into the pack house. The heavy front doors slammed behind him. Silence followed. A strange silence. Vivienne was the first to move. "What do you think it is?" Nobody answered. Her gaze drifted toward the pack house. Hope flashed across her face. Bright. Dangerous. Hungry. Then she smiled. A real smile this time. As though she already knew. As though fate itself had finally remembered her name. Around them, Ironvale slowly returned to life. The forge began ringing again. Warriors resumed training. Servants continued working. Yet something had shifted. Everyone felt it, though nobody could say why. The message did not remain a secret for long. Nothing ever did in Ironvale. By sunset, whispers had already slipped through the kitchens, the barracks, and the training grounds. Servants carried rumors faster than horses. Warriors pretended not to gossip, then gossiped anyway. By the time darkness settled over the pack, everyone knew one thing. The message had come from the Obsidian Crown. Nobody knew what it said. That only made it worse. Or better, depending on who was listening. Inside the pack house, Alpha Cedric Ashwin stood at the head of the long dining table. The unopened bottle of wine beside him had been forgotten. His wife sat rigidly in her chair. Across from her, Vivian looked as though she might burst from excitement. Only Celeste seemed untouched by the tension. Or perhaps she simply hid it better. The scroll rested on the table between them. Its black seal gleamed beneath the candlelight. A silver crown pressed into dark wax. The mark of Supreme Alpha King Leon Massimo. Even looking at it felt strange, like staring directly at the moon. Everyone knew his name. Very few had ever seen him. For years, stories about him had traveled through the territories. The youngest Alpha King in generations, the ruler of Ravenhold, the wolf who united the strongest packs beneath the Obsidian Crown. Some called him brilliant. Others called him ruthless. Most simply called him dangerous. Alpha Cedric cleared his throat. Nobody spoke, not even Vivian. That alone was remarkable. "The message arrived this afternoon," Cedric began. His voice sounded oddly strained, as if he still couldn't quite believe the words himself. Marissa leaned forward. "Well?" Cedric looked down at the letter, then back up. "The Supreme Alpha King intends to take a Luna." The room went silent. Completely silent. For a second, even the candles seemed to stop flickering. Vivian blinked, then sat straighter. "A Luna?" Cedric nodded. "The Crown has begun searching for suitable candidates." A strange look passed between Cedric and Marissa. Hope, shock, greed, fear, all tangled together. Celeste noticed it immediately. She always noticed things. "The king has narrowed his search." Cedric unfolded the scroll. His eyes scanned the page again, perhaps for the 10th time. The daughters of several alpha families have been selected. Vivian gripped the edge of her chair. "And?" Cedric exhaled slowly. "Ironvale is among them." The words landed like thunder. Marissa gasped. Vivian's hand flew to her mouth. For a moment, pure disbelief filled her face. Then came joy. Bright, immediate, unmistakable. "Oh my goddess." She laughed. Actually laughed. "The Supreme Alpha King chose Ironvale." Cedric quickly raised a hand. "Not exactly, but we're on the list." "We are." Vivian was already smiling again. She couldn't help it. Neither could Marissa. "We must begin preparations immediately." Cedric nodded. The king's representatives will arrive soon. How soon? A few weeks. Vivian practically glowed. A few weeks. That was all. A few weeks stood between her and the life she had dreamed about since childhood. The room seemed smaller suddenly, filled with possibility, filled with ambition, filled with expectations. Only Celeste remained quiet. Her fingers rested lightly against her cup. She watched everyone else celebrate, watched the excitement spread through the room, watched her mother's mind race ahead, watched her sister imagine a future already won. Then she looked toward her father. Something felt wrong. Cedric wasn't smiling. Not really. There was excitement in his face. But there was something else, too. Worry. The kind of worry a man carried when he knew something others did not. The letter mentions candidates, Celeste said. The room paused. Vivian's smile faltered slightly. Cedric looked at her. Yes. More than one. Several. So nothing has been decided. The excitement cooled by a fraction. Just enough. Marissa frowned. Of course nothing has been decided. Vivian rolled her eyes. A knock interrupted the conversation. One of the household servants entered. Alpha. Cedric looked up. What is it? The pack is asking questions. A tired smile touched Cedric's face. Of course they are. The servant hesitated. They would like to know if the rumors are true. Vivienne stood before Cedric could answer. They are. The servant blinked. Vivienne lifted her chin. The Supreme Alpha King is searching for a Luna. Her smile widened. And Iron Veil has been chosen. The servant hurried away. The moment the door closed, distant voices echoed through the house. Then cheers. Lots of them. The news spread instantly. Outside, someone shouted her name. Then another. Then several more. The entire pack was already making assumptions. Dangerous assumptions. But nobody seemed interested in caution. Not tonight. Later, after dinner ended, Celeste stepped outside alone. The evening air felt cooler than usual. The celebration continued across the pack. Music drifted from the gathering hall. Laughter followed. Everyone was dreaming. Everyone was hoping. Everyone was imagining what life might become. Celeste looked toward the stars. Above them all, the moon hung silent and pale, unmoved by excitement, unmoved by ambition, unmoved by dreams. Behind her, the pack celebrated a future that had not happened yet. By the next morning, Iron Veil had already made its choice. The Supreme Alpha King had not, but Iron Veil had. People spoke Vivian's name as though the matter had already been settled. The bakers spoke it while kneading bread. The warriors spoke it while sharpening blades. The servants whispered it while changing linens. Vivienne, future Luna, future queen of the obsidian crown. The words spread through the pack like wildfire. By breakfast, even the children had begun repeating them. Celeste heard it 3 times before finishing her tea. She did not correct anyone. There seemed little point. A loud laugh drifted from the drawing room. Vivienne! Of course. Celeste continued walking. Inside, she found her younger sister surrounded by 3 friends. They sat around a table covered with fabrics. Blue, silver, white. Colors of the crown. Vivienne held one of the dresses against herself. What do you think? It looks beautiful. It looks expensive. It looks royal. The answers came immediately. Vivienne smiled. She liked those answers. One of the girls noticed Celeste standing in the doorway. Her smile faltered. The room grew awkward. Just for a second. Then Vivienne recovered. Perfect timing. Celeste immediately knew she wasn't going to like what came next. Can you take these measurements to the seamstress? Several sheets of paper were pushed toward her. Celeste glanced at them. There were dozens. You haven't visited the seamstress yet? No. Vivienne smiled sweetly. You can go for me. One of the girls looked uncomfortable. Even she knew what was happening. Vivienne was treating her sister like a servant. Again. Celeste took the papers. Anything else? The question surprised everyone, especially Vivienne. No argument, no complaint, nothing. For some reason, that irritated her more. No. Celeste nodded and left. The laughter resumed behind her before she reached the end of the hallway. It always did. Outside, the autumn air felt cooler. She breathed it in slowly. The farther she got from the drawing room, the lighter she felt. The path toward the village curved around the edge of the forest. Most people hurried through this part. Celeste never did. A patch of tiny blue flowers near the roadside caught her attention. She stopped, immediately. The flowers shouldn't have been blooming this late. Curious, she crouched beside them. A small notebook appeared from her pocket. The worn leather cover looked years old. She flipped through pages filled with sketches. Flowers, leaves, roots. Notes scribbled neatly in the margins. A small smile touched her lips. A real one, different from the smiles she wore around people. This one belonged only to her. Carefully, she sketched the flower. Not perfectly, just enough to remember. A breeze moved through the trees. Somewhere above, birds scattered from a branch. For a few peaceful moments, there was no Luna, no crown, no expectations, just Celeste, and a flower she had never seen before. The moment ended when a voice called her name. "Miss Ashwin." She looked up. An older woman stood further down the path. The village healer. Miriam. The woman smiled. "Another discovery?" Celeste closed the notebook. "Maybe." Miriam laughed. "You've been saying maybe for years." Celeste stood. "One day I'll identify them all. You'll need several lifetimes. Then I'd better start soon." The healer shook her head. Amusement danced in her eyes. "You should have been born a scholar." The words lingered after Miriam left. A scholar. An explorer. A traveler. Anything except what everyone expected her to be. By the time Celeste reached the seamstress, she found herself thinking about distant territories again, about forests she had never seen, flowers she had never drawn, mountains beyond the borders of Ironvale. The thought made her smile. Then reality returned, as it always did. When she returned to the pack house hours later, she found workers carrying furniture through the halls. Marissa directed them from the staircase. Vivienne stood nearby, discussing guest lists. Neither noticed Celeste enter. She wasn't surprised. The unnoticed learned not to expect notice. She handed the measurements to a servant and quietly moved toward the rear gardens. The noise faded behind her. Good. She needed quiet. The gardens sat near the edge of the pack grounds. Few people visited them anymore. The flowers there grew mostly wild, which made Celeste like them more. She followed a narrow stone path until she reached her favorite bench. Then she stopped. Someone was already sitting there, Alpha Cedric. Her father looked older than usual. The morning light revealed lines around his eyes she had never noticed before. He stared at something in his hands. The royal letter. Again. For a long moment, he didn't realize she was there. That alone felt strange. "Father?" Cedric looked up. A smile appeared. Tired, but genuine. "Celeste." He folded the letter immediately. Too quickly, as if he didn't want her reading it. Interesting. She sat beside him. Neither spoke for a while. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It rarely was with her father. Finally, Cedric sighed, the kind that seemed to carry years inside it. "The pack is excited." Celeste glanced toward the house. "They certainly are." His smile faded. For a moment, his gaze drifted toward the folded letter, then toward the distant horizon. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "people become excited about things they don't understand." The words settled between them. Simple, yet heavy. Celeste looked at him carefully. There it was again. The same thing she had seen at dinner. The same thing she had seen when the letter arrived. Worry. Not fear. Not exactly. Something deeper. Something that had nothing to do with celebrations. "Father?" Cedric looked at her. She almost asked. Almost. But something stopped her. Perhaps because she sensed he wasn't ready to answer. Or perhaps because she wasn't ready to hear it. A voice suddenly echoed across the gardens. "Mother says we need more silver ribbons." Vivienne. Again. Cedric closed his eyes briefly. Just briefly. Then he stood. The moment was gone. Whatever he had almost said remained trapped behind his silence. And as Celeste watched him walk back toward the pack house, one thought refused to leave her mind. The entire pack seemed certain about what was coming. Vivienne seemed certain. Marissa seemed certain. Even the servants seemed certain. Yet Alpha Cedric Ashwin looked like a man waiting for a storm, and storms rarely arrived without a reason. Far beyond Ironvale, another pack was preparing as well, not for a celebration, for a journey. The stables of Ravenhold stood silent beneath the early morning sky. Most of the kingdom still slept. A single lantern burned near the eastern gate. Its light reflected off polished black leather. A horse stamped its hoof, impatient, waiting. Its rider looked much the same. Absolutely not. The old beta folded his arms. The escort has already been arranged. The man standing before him didn't react. A black coat rested over one arm. Travel supplies lay neatly packed beside him. Everything suggested he had already made his decision. The beta sighed. You are the supreme alpha king. Still no reaction. People don't simply wander into unfamiliar territories alone. At that, Leon Massimo finally looked up. Cold blue eyes met the older wolf's. The beta immediately regretted speaking. Not because Leon was cruel, because Leon had a habit of looking directly through excuses. Then perhaps people should. His voice was calm. The matter-of-fact tone somehow made it worse. The beta groaned. You've already decided. Yes. Then why are we having this conversation? A corner of Leon's mouth moved, almost a smile. Almost. Because you insisted. The beta muttered something unpleasant under his breath. Leon ignored it. As usual, at 29, he had become one of the most feared wolves in the territories. Not because he shouted, not because he threatened. Quite the opposite. Leon rarely raised his voice, rarely lost his temper, rarely repeated himself. When he made a decision, it stayed made. The beta watched him secure a sword to his side, not ceremonial, not decorative, a real weapon, one that had seen use. You still haven't told me why. Leon grabbed his coat. The question lingered between them. For a moment, he considered answering honestly. Then he looked toward the distant horizon, toward the territories, toward the alpha families waiting for his arrival. I want the truth. The beta frowned. What truth? The kind people hide. Silence followed. The old wolf stared at him, then understanding slowly appeared. Oh, Leon said nothing. He didn't need to. Everyone changed when they learned who he was. Warriors stood straighter. Alphas became careful. People smiled more, lied more, performed more. It made choosing a Luna difficult. How could he know someone if they were always pretending? How could he trust them? The beta rubbed his jaw. So you're arriving early. One day. And disguised. Leon nodded. The beta laughed. Actually laughed. I would pay good money to see their faces. You won't. Shame. Leon mounted his horse. The animal settled instantly beneath him. Years of training had taught it exactly who sat in the saddle. The beta shook his head. You're impossible. So I've been told. You'll at least take guards. No. Leon. No. The beta closed his eyes. A long-suffering expression crossed his face. Then he stepped aside. Defeated. Again. Fine. Leon adjusted his gloves. Black. Like everything else. He preferred black. Always had. It drew less attention. People rarely believed that, but it was true. Attention had followed him long enough. He had no desire to invite more. The gates slowly opened. Cold morning air swept through Ravenhold. Beyond them stretched miles of road, miles of forest, miles of territory. The horse stepped forward, then another. Soon the fortress disappeared behind him. Hours passed, then a day, then another. Villages came and went. Forests blurred together. The farther Leon traveled from Ravenhold, the quieter his thoughts became, until eventually only one question remained. Who was she? Not her name. He already had names, reports, descriptions, recommendations, pages of information. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that none of it felt real. People described what they wanted him to see, not what existed. Leon wanted reality, nothing more, nothing less. By late afternoon, Ironvale's borders finally appeared. A wooden sign marked the territory, simple, weathered, honest. Leon slowed his horse. According to the schedule, the royal delegation would arrive tomorrow. Trumpets, banners, announcements, an entire parade of nonsense. Today, however, nobody expected him. Exactly as he preferred. A small smile appeared, this time real. Very small, very brief. Then it vanished. He guided the horse forward, toward Ironvale, toward answers. A cool breeze moved through the pack as he guided his horse past the main gate. The guards barely glanced at him. One looked up. Passing through? Leon nodded. From Ravenhold. That part was true. The guard relaxed immediately. Ravenhold warriors were respected everywhere. Few people wanted trouble with wolves from the Supreme Alpha King's territory. Looking for work? Maybe. The guard pointed toward the stables. You can leave your horse there. Leon thanked him and moved on. His black horse drew more attention than he did. That was useful. People often focused on the wrong things. A stable boy hurried over the moment he arrived. The boy's eyes widened. Beautiful animal. Leon handed him the reins. He knows it. The boy laughed. The horse looked pleased with himself. Leon almost smiled. Almost. The pack was busier than he expected. Servants rushed between buildings. Workers hung fresh banners. The scent of polished wood, fresh bread, and paint filled the air. Everyone was preparing. For him. The irony wasn't lost on him. No one realized the man they were preparing for was already standing among them. A group of women passed nearby, carrying baskets. Their conversation drifted toward him. Heard she's already being fitted for new gowns. Who? Vivienne Ashwin. The second woman sighed dreamily. She's beautiful enough to be Luna. More than beautiful. The first woman nodded. Confident, too. Leon kept walking. Listening. That was the easy part. People talked constantly. Most never realized how much they revealed. Near the training yard, several warriors sat sharpening weapons. One of them noticed Leon. You from Ravenhold? Leon nodded. The warrior grinned. Then you've probably seen the Supreme Alpha King. A younger warrior leaned forward immediately. What's he like? Leon remained perfectly calm. Years of practice made lying surprisingly easy, especially when the truth sat directly in front of people. Tall. The younger warrior nodded eagerly. I heard that. Quiet. Another nod. I heard that too. Leon continued. Not very friendly. The warriors laughed. One nearly dropped his whetstone. See? I told you. The younger warrior looked impressed. What about the Luna search? Leon shrugged. People talk. That answer seemed to satisfy them, mostly. Eventually he moved on. The deeper he traveled into Ironvale, the more he heard. Vivienne. 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 Her name followed him everywhere. Future Luna. Future queen. Future ruler. Yet something felt strange. The praise always sounded the same. Like people were repeating a story they had heard, rather than one they had lived. As darkness settled over Ironvale, Leon found himself near the market square. A few merchants were closing for the evening. One elderly herbalist packed jars into wooden crates. Her movements were slow, careful. Beside her stood a younger woman helping organize supplies. They were discussing the Alpha's daughters. Again. Leon almost laughed. Ironvale seemed capable of discussing little else. Vivienne is certainly beautiful. The herbalist nodded. Nobody argues that. The younger woman smiled. My brother says she already acts like Luna. The herbalist hummed. Not agreement, not disagreement. Just thought. What? The younger woman asked. The older woman tied a bundle of dried herbs. Beauty is useful. Another bundle. Kindness is useful too. The younger woman frowned. What's that supposed to mean? The herbalist didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pointed toward a shelf. Who do you think gathered those moonroot flowers last winter? The younger woman blinked. Celeste. And the fever herbs? Celeste. The sleeping moss? Celeste. The older woman smiled. A small smile. The kind that carried years of memory. People notice bright things first. Leon followed the conversation carefully. The younger woman glanced toward the pack house. You're saying Celeste is better? The herbalist shook her head. No. She secured the final crate. I'm saying people don't always notice what's important. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then customers arrived. The conversation ended, but Leon remained where he was, watching, thinking. The first mention of Celeste all day. Not beauty, not status, usefulness, quiet contributions. Interesting, very interesting. A movement near the edge of the square caught his attention. A figure crossed the road carrying several books, chestnut hair, simple clothing, a notebook tucked beneath one arm. She moved quickly, as if she had somewhere she preferred to be. No one stopped her. No one called her name. No one paid much attention. She disappeared around a corner, gone as quickly as she appeared. Leon frowned. For some reason, he found himself watching the empty space she'd left behind. Then he looked away. Perhaps tomorrow he would learn more. Tonight had already given him enough. Everyone in Ironvale seemed convinced they knew who should become Luna. Everyone seemed convinced they knew exactly what the Supreme Alpha King wanted. The problem was, Most people had never met Leon Massimo. And if there was one thing he had learned throughout his life, it was this. The things people expected him to want were rarely the things he actually did. That evening, Ironvale gathered for a celebration. Not an official one. Alpha Cedric had forbidden it. But that did little to stop people. Music drifted from the gathering hall. Laughter spilled into the night. Someone had brought wine, someone else had brought more. The result was predictable. Leon sat alone near the edge of the courtyard, a mug resting untouched in his hand. Nobody paid him much attention. Exactly as he preferred. Around him, conversations rose and fell. Stories, rumors, predictions. The Luna search remained everyone's favorite topic. My cousin says the king has already made his choice. Impossible. Why? He hasn't even arrived. The table erupted into laughter. After a while, the noise became tiring. He left his mug behind and wandered away from the celebration. The farther he walked, the quieter it became. Soon only distant music remained. A stone path led toward the rear gardens. Moonlight washed over the flowers. Most had already closed for the night. The air smelled faintly of jasmine. Leon paused. Voices floated through the darkness. Women's voices. One sharp, one calm. He recognized them immediately. Vivienne. Celeste. Interesting. He stepped into the shadows beneath an old oak tree. The sisters sat on a stone bench, surrounded by climbing roses. Vivienne was speaking. They should have arrived by now. Celeste looked up from the notebook resting in her lap. The representatives? The king. Vivienne rolled her eyes. The representatives are just messengers. The moonlight caught her golden hair. For a moment, she looked exactly as everyone described her. Beautiful, confident, almost regal. I still don't understand why you're so excited. Celeste's voice remained gentle. Vivienne stared at her. You're joking. I'm not. A laugh escaped Vivienne. You truly don't understand. She leaned back against the bench. The Supreme Alpha King is the most powerful wolf in the territories. Yes. I could become Luna. Maybe. Vivienne groaned. Maybe. She mimicked Celeste's voice. You always say maybe. A small smile touched Celeste's lips. Vivienne pointed toward the pack house. Our family would never worry about status again. Status isn't everything. It matters. To some people. It matters to everyone. Celeste didn't argue. That seemed to frustrate Vivienne. It always did. Tell me honestly, Vivienne said. If you were chosen, wouldn't you be excited? The question lingered. Celeste looked down at her sketchbook. Her fingers rested lightly against the worn cover. For a moment, Leon thought she wouldn't answer. Then she did. I'd be terrified. Vivienne blinked. Terrified? It's a huge responsibility. The answer seemed to surprise her sister. Vivienne had expected excitement, ambition, anything but that. You'd rule beside the Supreme Alpha King. Exactly. Celeste closed the sketchbook. A Luna isn't a title. Vivienne laughed. Of course it's a title. No. The word was quiet, firm. A Luna is responsible for thousands of people. Vivienne waved a dismissive hand. You're making it sound difficult. It is difficult. Silence followed. Leon found himself listening more carefully. A Luna should make people feel safe, Celeste continued. She should listen. She should protect. She should put the pack before herself. The words settled softly into the night. Simple words, yet Leon noticed something. Celeste believed every one of them. Vivienne clearly did not. You sound like an elder. Vivienne leaned back again. I think you're overcomplicating things. How? People follow power. Celeste frowned. Not always. Most of the time. Vivienne picked at one of the rose petals beside her. If the king chooses me, people will respect me. A strange look crossed Celeste's face. The kind that appeared when she disagreed but didn't want an argument. Vivienne noticed it immediately. What? Nothing. No. What? Celeste hesitated, then sighed. If respect only comes because of a title, she looked toward the stars. It isn't really respect. The garden fell quiet. Even the distant music seemed farther away. Leon stared at her. The sentence wasn't dramatic, wasn't clever, yet it lingered. Vivienne scoffed. Easy for you to say. Why? Because you don't want any of it. Celeste didn't answer. Vivienne leaned forward. You're the only person in Ironvale who isn't dreaming about this. A small smile appeared. Soft, almost sad. That's not true. Oh? What are you dreaming about then? For a moment, Celeste simply looked at the moonlit garden. Then she opened the sketchbook. Leon couldn't see the pages clearly, but he saw flowers. Dozens of them. Carefully drawn flowers, pressed leaves, neat notes. Years of work. I still want to see the Southern Territories. Vivian stared. The what? The Southern Territories. Celeste's smile grew slightly. They have flowers that don't grow anywhere else. Vivian looked horrified. Flowers? The mountains too. And the coastal forests. I've read about them. You want to travel the world for flowers? The disbelief in her voice was genuine. Celeste laughed softly. The sound surprised Leon. It was the first time he had heard her laugh. Not just flowers. Herbs, Vivian groaned. That's even worse. Celeste shook her head. You asked. I thought you'd give a normal answer. The sisters sat in silence for a moment. Then Vivian smiled. A slow smile. The kind Leon was beginning to distrust. You know what I think? Celeste immediately looked concerned. That alone was amusing. What? I think you're wasting your life. The words landed harder than Vivian intended, or perhaps exactly as she intended. The smile disappeared from Celeste's face. You spend all your time hiding, Vivian continued, drawing flowers, helping strangers, collecting plants. What does any of it accomplish? Leon watched closely. For the first time, hurt appeared in Celeste's eyes. Small, brief, real. Then she lowered her gaze, and just like that, the hurt was gone. Buried. As though she had years of practice. Perhaps she did. Maybe nothing. The answer caught Vivian off guard. She had expected a defense, an argument. Instead, she got honesty. Again. You should want more, Vivian said quietly. Celeste looked down at the sketchbook. Her fingers brushed the worn edges. Then she smiled. A different smile this time, one that belonged entirely to her. I do. The simple answer ended the conversation. Vivian looked away first, not Celeste. For some reason, that fascinated Leon. The pack adored Vivian. The entire territory praised her. Yet here, in a quiet garden with no audience, she seemed strangely small, while the overlooked sister beside her seemed anything but. Eventually, Vivian stood. I should go. You should. Vivian brushed dirt from her dress, then paused. You really think the king won't choose me? Celeste looked up. The answer came without hesitation. I don't know what he'll choose. Vivian smiled, confident, certain. I do. Then she walked away. The sound of her footsteps slowly disappeared into the night. Silence returned. Celeste remained on the bench, alone. She opened the sketchbook again. Moonlight spilled across the pages. Flowers, notes, dreams pressed between paper. For a long time she simply sat there, watching the stars, thinking. Leon should have left. Instead, he stayed, and watched. The next morning, Ironvale woke to another message from the Obsidian Crown, and this one changed everything. By noon, the entire pack was talking about it. The final candidates would not travel to Ravenhold. Ravenhold would come to them. The chosen daughters from every selected alpha family would gather at Ironvale. The final decision would be made there, in front of everyone. The announcement spread panic almost as quickly as excitement. Servants rushed through hallways. Warriors doubled patrols. Guest rooms were prepared. Additional cooks were brought in from nearby villages. Every mistake suddenly felt dangerous. Every detail suddenly mattered. And somehow, Ironvale became even more certain that Vivian would be chosen. After all, if the final gathering was being held here, surely that meant something. At least, that was what people kept saying. By the following afternoon, the first guests began arriving. Then another family. Then another. Carriages rolled through the gates. Horses filled the stables. The pack grounds became crowded with strangers. Alpha families, beta families, advisors, warriors, future Luna candidates. The atmosphere shifted. Competition had arrived. For the first time, Vivian seemed nervous. Not frightened, just aware. The other candidates were real now. One was known for her intelligence. Another came from one of the wealthiest packs in the territories. A third possessed a wolf so powerful people still talked about it. Suddenly becoming Luna no longer looked guaranteed. Yet Vivian remained determined. And beautiful. Especially today. The day the Supreme Alpha King was finally scheduled to arrive. The entire pack gathered near the main courtyard. Rows of chairs filled the open space. Banners bearing the symbol of the obsidian crown moved gently in the wind. Excitement buzzed through the crowd. Children sat on their parents' shoulders. Warriors stood at attention. Servants peeked from windows. Nobody wanted to miss the moment. Near the front stood Vivienne. Her pale silver dress shimmered whenever sunlight touched it. Her golden curls had been carefully arranged. Confidence sat on her shoulders like a crown. Marissa hovered nearby, proud, hopeful, already imagining a future she could almost touch. Not far away stood the other candidates, each beautiful in her own way, each trying not to look nervous, each hoping their life was about to change. And several rows behind them stood Celeste, exactly where she preferred, away from attention, away from expectations. Her dress was simple, soft blue, nothing remarkable, at least not to most people. A notebook rested hidden inside her sleeve. She had been sketching flowers that morning. The thought almost made her smile. A loud trumpet interrupted her thoughts. The crowd immediately straightened. Conversations died. The gates began to open. At last, the Supreme Alpha King's delegation had arrived. One carriage entered, then another, then another. Warriors followed, dressed in black, disciplined, silent. The atmosphere changed instantly. Power had entered Ironvale. People felt it, even before they saw him. A black carriage finally rolled through the gates. The royal carriage. The crowd collectively held its breath. This was it. Vivienne subtly adjusted her posture. Marissa clasped her hands together. Several candidates looked ready to faint. The carriage stopped. A servant stepped forward. The door opened. Everyone stared, waiting. Nothing happened. Seconds passed. Confusion spread through the crowd. Then a voice spoke from the side, calm, deep, familiar. Looking for someone? Heads turned. Every single one. The speaker stood near the front of the gathering, dressed entirely in black, tall, broad-shouldered. Dark curls stirred gently in the wind. And those eyes, cold blue, impossible to forget. Recognition hit first. Not the crowd, Vivienne, then Cedric, then Celeste. The warrior, the traveler, the man from Ravenhold, the stranger. The realization spread like wildfire. Gasps erupted. Several people stood. Someone dropped a tray. The sound shattered against the stones. No one noticed, because the impossible truth was already unfolding before them. The warrior from Ravenhold was walking forward, straight toward the center, straight toward the royal delegation, straight toward the carriage. The royal guards lowered their heads. Every single one. The crowd froze. Cedric's face drained of color. Marissa looked ready to collapse. Vivienne simply stared. Leon Massimo stopped before the gathered families. Then one of the royal advisors stepped forward. His voice carried across the entire courtyard. Presenting His Majesty, the advisor bowed deeply. Supreme Alpha King Leon Massimo. Silence. Absolute silence. The entire pack seemed unable to breathe. Leon surveyed the crowd. Calm, unreadable. His gaze moved across the candidates, one by one. Several visibly brightened when his eyes landed on them. Vivienne most of all. Her confidence returned instantly. Of course, now everything made sense. He had already met her, already seen her, already observed her. Surely she had impressed him. Around them, whispers exploded. The king, the king, the king. Leon ignored them all. Then he took a step forward. Everyone watched. Vivienne's smile widened. Another step, toward the candidates, toward the future Luna, toward the woman everyone expected. The entire courtyard held its breath. Leon reached the front row, stopped. Vivienne lifted her chin. Ready, certain, victorious. Then Leon walked past her. The smile vanished from her face. Confusion appeared first, then disbelief, then panic. The crowd stirred. Whispers erupted. Leon continued walking, past every candidate, past every hopeful family, past every expectation, straight toward the back, toward the woman standing quietly among the crowd. Toward Celeste Ashwin. Leon stopped in front of her. The courtyard fell silent, again. This silence felt different, heavier, dangerous. Thousands of eyes turned toward them. Celeste stared at him, completely stunned. Leon held her gaze. For a long moment neither spoke. Then, very slowly, Leon extended his hand. and the entire world seemed to stop. For Celeste, for Vivian, for Ironvale, for everyone. Because suddenly one question mattered more than any other. Why her? For one long, impossible moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed, nobody spoke. Leon Massimo's hand remained extended toward Celeste. The Supreme Alpha King stood calm beneath the afternoon sun, as though he had not just shattered every expectation in Ironvale, as though he had not just walked past every candidate, as though he had not just chosen the one woman nobody expected. A chair scraped loudly against stone. Vivian, the sound snapped the courtyard back to life. No, the word escaped before she could stop it. Several heads turned. Vivian stood frozen. Her face had gone pale. No, this time louder, more desperate. The confidence she had worn all week was gone. Cracks spread through it like glass. There must be a mistake. Whispers erupted instantly. Across the courtyard, mothers exchanged looks. Warriors muttered. Even the visiting Alpha families looked stunned. Marissa stepped forward. "Your Majesty!" Her voice trembled. Not with fear, with panic. Surely she had heard wrong. Surely everyone had. Leon didn't even look at her. His eyes remained on Celeste. That somehow made it worse. Marissa swallowed. "My daughter Vivian is standing right here." The statement sounded ridiculous the moment it left her mouth. Yet she couldn't stop herself. Years of assumptions refused to die quietly. Leon remained silent. Cedric looked as though someone had struck him. The color had completely left his face. His gaze moved from Leon to Celeste to Vivian, then back again. He looked like a man watching a bridge collapse beneath his feet. One of the visiting elders leaned toward another. "What is happening?" The second elder shook his head. "I have no idea." Neither did anyone else, including Celeste. Especially Celeste. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it. Leon still hadn't lowered his hand. Still waited. Still watched her. The entire territory seemed to disappear. The crowd, the whispers, the panic, all of it faded, leaving only one impossible reality. The Supreme Alpha King had chosen her. Not Vivian. Not one of the other candidates. Her. Why? The question echoed endlessly inside her head. Why? 1,000 reasons told her to refuse. 1,000 more told her to run. Nothing about this made sense. Nothing. Yet when she looked into Leon's blue eyes, she saw no uncertainty, no hesitation, no mistake, only certainty. And somehow that frightened her most of all, because she had none. "Celeste?" The voice belonged to Cedric, her father. She turned. His expression twisted with confusion and worry. That worry again. The same worry she had noticed since the first letter arrived. Only now it looked worse. Much worse. As though some fear he had carried for weeks had finally come true. A strange feeling settled in her stomach. Questions. Too many questions. And no answers. Around her, the whispers grew louder. Vivian suddenly laughed. A sharp sound. Brittle. Unstable. "You can't be serious." Nobody responded. Vivian looked around desperately, searching for someone. Anyone. To agree with her. "This is ridiculous!" Her voice rose. "He doesn't even know her." The words hit harder than she intended, because part of her believed them. Part of her couldn't understand why anyone would choose Celeste. Not over her. Never over her. Marissa immediately grabbed Vivian's arm. "Enough." "No." Vivian pulled away. Tears now burned in her eyes. "I want to know why." A dangerous question. Because suddenly everyone wanted the same thing. Why? Why Celeste? Why not Vivian? Why gather all these families? Why hold this event? Why choose the woman nobody expected? The crowd grew restless. Even the visiting alphas looked frustrated. Leon could feel it. He said nothing, not a single word. That silence somehow made everything worse. Finally, a man stepped forward from the royal delegation. Older, broad-shouldered, gray beginning to touch his dark hair. The king's beta. The same man who had spent years standing beside Leon. Years watching kingdoms rise and fall. He surveyed the crowd, then sighed. The sigh of a man who knew this moment was coming. "His Majesty's choice has been made." The words immediately triggered another wave of whispers. The beta continued. "The crown does not explain royal decisions." That did not help, at all. Several people actually looked more alarmed. One elder frowned deeply. What does that mean? The beta smiled. Not kindly, not cruelly, just knowingly. It means His Majesty owes no one an explanation. The silence that followed felt dangerous. Because it was true. Leon Massimo could choose whoever he wanted. Nobody could stop him. Nobody could challenge him. Nobody could demand answers. Not even the alphas. The realization settled over the gathering like a storm cloud. For the first time, people understood the situation. This wasn't a discussion. This wasn't a vote. This wasn't a competition. The Supreme Alpha King had decided, and that was the end of it. Vivian looked devastated. Marissa looked horrified. Cedric looked trapped. The visiting candidates looked stunned. Meanwhile, Celeste felt none of those things, because she was still stuck on the same question. Why? Her gaze drifted back to Leon. The answer wasn't there. His expression revealed nothing. Nothing at all. Yet as she stood there beneath the weight of 1,000 staring eyes, another realization slowly formed. If she said no, everything ended. The questions, the confusion, the fear, it all ended. She could return to her quiet life, her flowers, her sketchbook, her forgotten corner of Ironvale. The thought should have comforted her. Instead, for the first time in years, curiosity won, not ambition, not dreams of becoming Luna. Curiosity, the same curiosity that made her stop for unusual flowers, the same curiosity that filled entire sketchbooks, the same curiosity that had always pulled her toward unknown paths. She wanted answers, and somehow, she suspected those answers stood directly in front of her. Slowly, Celeste looked at Leon's outstretched hand. Then she made a decision. Not out loud, not yet. Inside, where nobody could see it. Whatever happened next, she was going to learn the truth, even if it changed her life forever. And judging by the look on Leon Massimo's face, it already had. The departure happened the next morning. Ironvale had never felt so quiet. Not because people had nothing to say, because everyone was watching. Servants lined the front steps. Warriors gathered near the gates. Even villagers stood along the roads. Nobody wanted to miss the moment. The forgotten daughter was leaving with the Supreme Alpha King. Some still looked confused. Others looked jealous. A few looked angry. Most simply looked stunned. Celeste stood at the bottom of the packhouse steps with a small travel bag in her hand. Everything she owned fit inside it. A few dresses, a sketchbook, several pencils, pressed flowers tucked carefully between pages. Not exactly what most people would bring when leaving to become the future Luna of the Obsidian Crown. But then again, Celeste had never expected this life. A movement caught her eye. Her father approached. Cedric looked tired. He hadn't slept much. That much was obvious. Dark circles rested beneath his eyes. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Cedric pulled her into an embrace. A rare thing. A very rare thing. Celeste froze in surprise, before slowly hugging him back. "I'm sorry." The words were barely above a whisper. She frowned. For what? Cedric's jaw tightened. Something flickered across his face. Regret. Old regret. The kind that had been living there for years. Then it disappeared. I should have done better. Her chest tightened. Suddenly she was 8 years old again, waiting for someone to notice she was standing there, waiting for someone to choose her. Waiting, always waiting. "It's all right." The words came automatically. Cedric looked like he wanted to say more. Much more. Instead, he simply kissed her forehead, then stepped away. The moment was gone. Questions remained. As usual, nearby, Marissa stood stiffly, uncomfortable, unsure what to do. This wasn't the goodbye she'd imagined. Not even close. After a long pause, she finally hugged Celeste. Quickly, awkwardly, then let go. "We'll visit." Celeste nodded. She wasn't sure if that would happen. Neither was Marissa. Across the courtyard, Vivian stood alone, watching. Not crying, not speaking, just watching. The sisters' eyes met briefly. 100 things remained unsaid between them. Apologies, accusations, questions, hurt. Neither spoke, neither moved. Then Leon's carriage arrived. The moment ended. Just like that. The royal escort was considerably larger than before. Black carriages, royal guards, mounted warriors, the full weight of the Obsidian Crown. People stepped aside immediately. Power had a way of creating space. Leon dismounted from his horse. The crowd grew silent. Again. That seemed to happen whenever he appeared. Dressed entirely in black, he moved through the courtyard with the same calm confidence that somehow made everyone nervous. His dark curls shifted in the morning breeze. Those blue eyes swept across the gathered crowd, observing, measuring, missing nothing. Then they landed on Celeste. For some reason, her stomach tightened. Still, even now, Leon stopped before her. "You ready?" The question surprised her, not because of what he asked, because of how he asked it. No commands, no expectations, just a question. Celeste adjusted her grip on her bag. "As ready as I can be." Something almost resembling amusement touched his face. Almost. Then it vanished. Good. That was apparently the end of the conversation. Leon turned toward the carriage. Celeste stared after him. What a strange man. Moments later, they were traveling. Iron Veils slowly disappeared behind them. The familiar roads, the familiar forests, the familiar life, all growing smaller. Celeste watched through the window until she could no longer see any of it. A strange sadness settled inside her. She wasn't sure whether she was grieving or simply afraid. The carriage rolled steadily onward. Silence filled the space between them. Leon sat across from her, reading reports, as though this journey were completely normal, as though he hadn't just turned her life upside down. For nearly an hour, neither spoke. Finally, Celeste had enough. "Why?" The word slipped out before she could stop it. Leon looked up. "Why what?" She blinked. Was he serious? "Why me?" Silence. Leon closed the report. The movement immediately made her nervous. Apparently, she wasn't the only one asking difficult questions. That's what everyone wants to know. "Yes. And you're not going to answer." "No." The response came so quickly she almost laughed. "Almost. You're impossible." A faint smile appeared, gone almost instantly. "So I've been told." The answer sounded familiar, like he'd said it before, many times. Celeste sighed. "Do you enjoy being frustrating?" "Not particularly. You could have fooled me." To her surprise, Leon chuckled. Actually chuckled. The sound transformed him, briefly. The cold king disappeared, leaving behind something more human. Then it was gone. Just as quickly. Interesting. Very interesting. She leaned back against her seat, studying him, trying to understand him. The problem was that nothing fit. He wasn't arrogant. She had expected arrogance. He wasn't cruel. She had expected that too. He wasn't charming. Definitely not charming. Most of the time, he seemed more comfortable with silence than people. Which raised even more questions. What kind of king travels alone into another territory? Leon looked out the window. The kind who wants honest answers. That answer felt important. Before she could ask more, he added, "What kind of future? Luna carries pressed flowers in her travel bag." Celeste nearly choked. Her eyes widened. Leon returned to reading, as though he hadn't just exposed her secret. Heat rushed into her face. "How do you know about that?" A page turned, calm, unbothered. "I pay attention." The simple answer silenced her. Because somehow, that felt like the most honest thing he had said all day. The carriage continued rolling forward. Neither spoke again for a while, yet the silence felt different now, less awkward, more curious. Outside, the territories stretched endlessly before them. Unknown forests, unknown roads, unknown destinations. And sitting across from her was a man she understood less with every passing mile. The supreme alpha king, the most powerful wolf in the territories. The man who refused to explain himself. The man who somehow knew about the flowers hidden inside her bag. Celeste looked out the window, then back at him. One question lingered above all the others. Just what kind of king had chosen her? Ravenhold was nothing like Celeste imagined. For most of her life, she had heard stories. A fortress carved from black stone, the heart of the obsidian crown, the home of the most powerful wolf in the territories. The stories had not prepared her. The fortress rose from the mountains like it had grown there, ancient, massive, unmoving. Its towers pierced the clouds, its walls stretched farther than she could see. Hundreds of banners bearing the crown's symbol moved in the wind. The sight stole her breath. Around them, soldiers trained in enormous courtyards. Messengers rushed between buildings. Servants carried stacks of documents. Everything moved. Everything worked. Everything seemed important. The carriage rolled through the main gates. People immediately stopped what they were doing. Not to stare at Celeste, to bow to Leon. Every single person. Warriors, servants, officials, even visiting alphas. Nobody hesitated. Nobody forgot. The respect was automatic, earned, or feared. Perhaps both. Celeste glanced toward Leon. He barely reacted, as if thousands of people lowering their heads was completely normal. Perhaps it was. The carriage finally stopped. Before anyone could move, the door opened. A silver-haired man stood outside. His expression was serious, relieved, and slightly annoyed. "You're late." Leon stepped down. "No, I'm not." "You are." "No." The older man looked ready to argue. Then he noticed Celeste. His eyes widened. "Oh." The annoyance vanished instantly. "Interesting." "Very interesting." Leon gestured toward her. "Celeste?" Then toward the man. "Beta Marcus." The beta. The same one who had spoken at Ironvale. Marcus immediately bowed, not deeply, but respectfully. "Future Luna." Celeste almost looked behind her. The title still felt strange, like it belonged to someone else. "Hello." Marcus smiled slightly, then looked at Leon, who started walking towards the fortress. People immediately scattered from his path. Celeste hurried after him. Ravenhold seemed endless. Hallways connected to larger hallways. Courtyards opened into gardens. Staircases led everywhere. The place felt more like a city than a home. Eventually they entered a large office, and immediately Celeste understood something. Leon wasn't just a king. He was drowning. Documents covered every surface. Maps filled entire walls. Reports sat stacked in towering piles. Letters waited unopened. 3 advisors stood nearby, looking exhausted. One immediately stepped forward. "Your Majesty." Another. "We need decisions regarding the eastern border." A third. "The mining dispute has worsened." Leon hadn't even sat down yet. The requests kept coming. Questions, problems, reports, complaints. Everyone wanted something. Everyone needed something. Everyone expected answers. Within minutes, the office transformed into controlled chaos. Celeste quietly stepped aside. Forgotten. Again. Strangely, she didn't mind. Because for the first time since meeting Leon, she was seeing something real. The man beneath the crown. The burden beneath the title. Hours passed. The sun slowly sank outside. Still Leon worked. Meeting after meeting. Decision after decision. Problem after problem. At one point, a servant entered carrying dinner. 2 hours later, the food remained untouched. At another point, Marcus practically shoved a cup of coffee into Leon's hand. Leon thanked him without looking up, then continued working. The beta sighed dramatically. "No one appreciates me." One advisor snorted. Another nodded. Leon ignored them all, again. Celeste found herself watching and thinking. At Ironvale, people spoke about power, about crowns, about status. Nobody spoke about this. The endless responsibility, the constant pressure, the impossible expectations, the loneliness. Because despite being surrounded by people, Leon somehow seemed alone, very alone. Later that evening, after the final advisor finally left, silence settled over the office. For the first time all day, Leon leaned back in his chair. Tired, actually tired. The sight surprised her. Kings weren't supposed to look exhausted, not in stories. Yet the man before her looked exactly that. Exhausted. A few dark curls had fallen across his forehead. The sleeves of his black shirt were rolled up. His eyes looked heavier than usual. Human. For the first time since she met him, human. "You haven't eaten." The words slipped out. Leon looked toward the cold dinner, then back at her. "I forgot." "You forgot." A faint smile appeared. "I was busy." Celeste stared, then laughed. Actually laughed. The sound surprised both of them. Leon raised an eyebrow. "What?" "You forgot to eat." "When you say it like that, it sounds ridiculous." "It is ridiculous." To her surprise, Leon laughed too. A short laugh. Rare. Genuine. The room suddenly felt different. Lighter. Then silence returned. Not awkward. Just quiet. After a moment, Celeste glanced toward the stacks of reports. "Does it always look like this?" Leon's gaze followed hers. Usually worse. That wasn't comforting. She studied him carefully. The man everyone feared. The man everyone obeyed. The man powerful enough to change lives with a single decision, and yet, he looked less like a king and more like someone carrying too much weight alone. The realization settled quietly inside her. Perhaps people had been wrong. Perhaps Leon wasn't cold. Perhaps he was simply tired in the way only lonely people become tired. Across the room, Leon watched her for a moment, then looked away, as though he had noticed something too. Outside, night settled over Ravenhold. The kingdom slept. Problems waited. Decisions waited. Tomorrow would bring more of both. But for the first time since arriving, Celeste felt some of her fear begin to fade. Not completely, just enough. Because the mystery of Leon Massimo was slowly changing shape, and the more she learned, the less certain she became that anyone truly knew him at all. 3 days after arriving in Ravenhold, Celeste discovered something surprising. The kingdom did not stop moving just because a king existed. Every morning brought new problems. Every afternoon brought new decisions. Every evening brought fresh reports. At first, she simply watched. Then she started helping. Accidentally, a servant carrying documents dropped half of them in a hallway. Celeste helped organize them. An advisor spent 20 minutes searching for a report. Celeste remembered where she had seen it. A healer requested herbs from the southern stores. Celeste knew exactly which ones were needed. Small things, nothing important. Yet somehow they kept happening. People began noticing. Not because she demanded attention, because things became easier when she was around. One morning, she arrived at Leon's office carrying tea, only to find 3 advisors arguing. A map covered the table. The Eastern Territories. Again, they both claim ownership. One advisor rubbed his forehead. The river moved. The border didn't. It did. It didn't. Celeste paused, then pointed. 3 men looked at her. Immediately. She almost stepped back. What? One advisor blinked. You have something to say? Celeste studied the map. The river split. Silence. She pointed again. Both sides are using the wrong branch. The room fell quiet. One advisor grabbed the map. Another looked closer. A third swore under his breath. 10 minutes later, the argument was over. Just like that. Leon watched the entire thing, saying nothing. That evening, Marcus cornered him. You know, she's helping, right? I noticed. And? Leon looked up from a report. And what? Marcus sighed dramatically. One day, I'm going to throw you out a window. That seems excessive. You're impossible. Leon returned to reading. The conversation, apparently, was finished. Marcus left muttering. Again. A week passed, then another. Slowly, Ravenhold stopped feeling foreign. Celeste learned names, faces, stories. The kitchen staff adored gossip. The guards respected punctuality. The healers respected competence. The librarians respected anyone who returned books on time. That last one made them immediately love Celeste. Especially an elderly librarian named Mrs. Hawthorne. The woman practically adopted her. You actually read them. Mrs. Hawthorne stared at a returned stack of books. Most people only borrow them. Celeste smiled. I liked them. The older woman looked suspicious. All of them? Even the boring parts. Mrs. Hawthorne nearly cried. The friendship was immediate. Her maids were easier. At first, they seemed terrified. Mostly because she was the future Luna. Eventually they realized Celeste was just Celeste. One afternoon, she found them arguing over flower arrangements. 20 minutes later, all 3 women sat on the floor around her sketchbook, sharing ideas, laughing, showing her flowers from different territories. It felt nice, unexpected, but nice. For the first time in years, she wasn't alone. The realization hurt a little, more than she expected, because it made her realize how lonely she had been at Ironvale. One evening, after dinner, she sat in one of the palace gardens, sketching a flower she had discovered that morning. The petals curled differently from anything she had seen before. Interesting. Very interesting. She became so focused, she didn't notice someone approaching. You're drawing again. Celeste jumped. The pencil nearly flew from her hand. Leon stood behind her. Of course, the one person capable of appearing out of nowhere. You scared me. A faint smile appeared, gone almost immediately. Sorry. The apology sounded suspiciously insincere. Celeste narrowed her eyes. Leon looked entirely unbothered. She returned to the sketch. For a few moments, neither spoke. The silence wasn't awkward anymore. Not really. Different. Comfortable sometimes. Strange other times. This was one of the strange times. Because Leon wasn't leaving. He simply stood there, watching. Eventually, she became aware of it. Very aware. The attention felt different from other people's attention. More focused. More intense. As though he wasn't merely looking at her. As though he was studying her. Trying to solve something. Her pencil slowed, then stopped. Finally, she looked up. What? Leon blinked. What? You keep staring. Silence. A dangerous silence, because instead of denying it, Leon simply said, I know. Heat immediately rushed into her face. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. She looked back down. Quickly, very quickly, the sketch suddenly became fascinating. Far more fascinating than the man standing beside her. Unfortunately, her traitorous mind disagreed. Because now she was noticing things she had previously ignored, like the way dark curls always seemed slightly untidy, or the way his black clothes somehow made those blue eyes stand out even more, or the fact that he was unfairly attractive, ridiculously attractive, the kind of attractive that became worse the longer someone looked, which was exactly why she wasn't looking. Not at all. Definitely not. A small sound reached her ears. Leon. Laughing. Very softly. Her embarrassment doubled. You find this funny? A little. Celeste groaned. The future Luna of the obsidian crown, reduced to being teased in a garden. Wonderful. Leon sat beside her, close enough to make her aware of every inch separating them, not close enough to touch. The distinction somehow made it worse. For a while, they watched the sunset together. Quiet. Comfortable. Then Leon spoke. You seem happier. The words surprised her. She thought about them, really thought about them, then looked down at the sketchbook. The pages weren't empty anymore. Flowers, plants, notes, discoveries, the things she had stopped drawing back home. Without realizing it, she smiled. A real smile. Maybe. Leon looked at her, long enough that she felt warm all over again. That intense stare. There it was, again. The one that made her forget what she was saying. The one she didn't understand. The one she definitely wasn't thinking about later. Probably, hopefully, eventually. Somewhere above them, the first stars appeared. The garden grew quieter, and for the first time since arriving in Ravenhold, Celeste found herself wondering something unexpected. Not why Leon had chosen her, not what secrets he was hiding, not what the future held, but something far more dangerous. What would happen if she started looking forward to seeing him too much? The celebration lasted until the stars filled the sky. Ravenhold had never looked more beautiful. Music drifted through the great hall. Candles glowed from every corner. Laughter echoed beneath ancient stone arches. And at the center of it all stood Celeste Ashwin. No, not Celeste Ashwin anymore. Luna Celeste Massimo. The title still felt strange. Even now, hours after the ceremony, hours after the crown had been placed upon her head, hours after the elders had spoken their blessings, hours after she had stood before the entire obsidian crown and accepted her place beside Leon, the memory still felt unreal. The marking ritual had been performed before the gathered kingdom. Ancient words, ancient promises, oaths older than Ravenhold itself. Then came the kiss, required by tradition, witnessed by everyone. Celeste's heart had nearly stopped when Leon stepped toward her. She remembered looking up, remembered those blue eyes, remembered forgetting every person in the room. The kiss had been brief, respectful, yet somehow it lingered in her thoughts long after it ended. The maids certainly hadn't helped. For the last hour, they had done little besides tease her. You're blushing again. I'm not. You are. I am not. 3 women laughed immediately. Celeste groaned. This was a mistake, a terrible mistake. One maid adjusted the sleeve of her white dress. Another fixed a strand of chestnut hair. The third looked entirely too pleased with herself. Our Luna is nervous. I am not nervous. Then why won't you stop pacing? Celeste immediately stopped pacing. The maids laughed even harder. Traitors. Every one of them. Eventually they left. The room fell quiet. Finally. Mercifully quiet. Moonlight spilled through the windows. A fire crackled softly nearby. The bedroom suddenly felt much larger than before, and much emptier. Celeste sat carefully on the edge of the bed, waiting, thinking, trying very hard not to think. A useless effort. The door opened. Her heart immediately betrayed her. Leon stepped inside. Gone were the ceremonial clothes. Gone was the crown. Gone was the image of the untouchable king. Tonight he looked simpler, more like the man she had met in the gardens, more like the man who forgot to eat when he worked. For a moment, neither spoke. The awkwardness arrived immediately, then stayed. Celeste stared at the floor. Leon stared at the fire. Somewhere a clock ticked, very loudly. Finally, Leon exhaled, a slow breath. "You look terrified." Celeste looked up, offended. "I'm not terrified." A faint smile appeared. "Good." The smile disappeared almost immediately. Then something changed. Leon's expression softened. "Not much. Just enough. We don't have to do anything tonight." The words surprised her. "You've had a long day." He sat down a respectful distance away. "We can wait." Celeste blinked. "Wait? As long as you need." His voice remained calm, steady, certain. There was no pressure in it, no expectation, no disappointment, just patience. The realization warmed something inside her, because Leon meant it. If she said no, he would accept it. Without complaint, without anger, without guilt. The choice was hers. For several moments she simply sat there, thinking, listening to the crackling fire, listening to her own heartbeat. The truth was, she wasn't afraid, nervous, absolutely, embarrassed, very. But afraid? No, not of him. Somewhere along the way, Leon Massimo had become the one person she felt safest with. The realization startled her, then settled quietly into place, like a missing piece, finally finding where it belonged. Slowly, she turned toward him. "I'm ready." For the first time that evening, Leon looked genuinely surprised. Then something warmer appeared. Relief, gratitude, happiness, small, quiet, real, the kind he rarely showed anyone. He reached for her hand, carefully, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Their fingers intertwined. The room seemed smaller suddenly. The distance between them disappeared, and when Leon leaned forward, Celeste met him halfway. The kiss was nothing like the first one, not ceremonial, not performed for a crowd, not required by tradition. This one belonged only to them, slow, careful, a promise instead of a performance. When they finally pulled apart, neither spoke. Words felt unnecessary. The moon climbed higher outside, the fire burned lower, and somewhere in the quiet hours of the night, beneath ancient blessings and older stars, two wolves chose each other completely, not because of crowns, not because of titles, not because of destiny, but because, somewhere between flowers and sketchbooks, between silence and understanding, between questions and answers, they had become home. For a while, peace settled over Ravenhold. Not perfect peace. Such a thing did not exist where kingdoms were concerned. But enough. Enough for Celeste to fill pages of her sketchbook again. Enough for Leon to occasionally leave his office before midnight. Enough for people to begin smiling when they spoke of their Luna. Which was precisely why the trouble surprised everyone. It began with a petition. A ridiculous one. At least that's what most people thought. The document arrived at the High Court of the Obsidian Crown on a rainy morning. 3 judges read it, then read it again. One of them nearly choked on his tea. The accusation was simple. Luna Celeste Massimo had bewitched the Supreme Alpha King. The petition claimed no reasonable explanation existed for his choice. Therefore, magic must have been involved. The claim came from Vivian Ashwin, former candidate, former favorite, former almost Luna. The story spread before lunch. By dinner, the entire kingdom knew. People discussed it in taverns, in markets, in training yards, in noble houses, everywhere. Some laughed, some shook their heads, others simply enjoyed the gossip. One merchant reportedly laughed so hard he fell off a chair. The petition quickly became the most entertaining thing happening in the territories, until Leon heard about it. Then it stopped being funny. The messenger arrived at Ravenhold just after noon. Marcus read the report first, then sighed, then rubbed his forehead, then sighed again. None of those reactions were encouraging. Leon looked up from his desk. "What?" Marcus handed him the paper. "Read it." The room fell silent. Several advisors immediately became interested, very interested. That was never a good sign. Leon read, then finished reading, then read the final page again. His expression never changed, which somehow felt worse. Marcus knew that look. The advisors knew that look. The unfortunate messenger definitely knew that look. Nobody spoke. Finally, Leon folded the document, very carefully, very neatly, a dangerous sign. Across the room, one advisor quietly started moving toward the door. Just in case. Your Majesty? Marcus sounded cautious. Leon looked up, blue eyes colder than usual. What exactly does she think happened? Nobody answered, because honestly, that was a very good question. Leon leaned back, silent, thinking. The room waited. Several long moments passed. Then Leon picked up a blank sheet of paper. Marcus immediately smiled, not because he felt happy, because he knew trouble was coming. The king wrote exactly one message, nothing more, nothing less, short, direct, impossible to misunderstand. When he finished, he handed it to the messenger. Send it. The man looked relieved, until he actually read it. Then he looked terrified, immediately. The messenger bowed, then practically ran from the room. The message reached Ironvale 2 days later. It reached the rest of the kingdom before sunset. Nobody was entirely sure how. Some stories simply moved faster than others. This one flew. By nightfall, people repeated the king's words everywhere. Markets, taverns, packhouses, training grounds. The message spread like wildfire. It read, Luna Celeste Massimo's name will not be dragged through the mud to soothe wounded pride. Vivienne Ashwin is hereby instructed to keep my Luna out of her mouth. Should she attempt another stunt of this nature, the consequences will be considerably less pleasant. Signed, Leon Massimo, Supreme Alpha King. The reaction was immediate and spectacular. People stared, then read it again, then laughed, then read it a third time. Not because it was funny, because it was shocking. Kings rarely responded personally. Kings almost never responded like this. The message wasn't political, it wasn't diplomatic, it wasn't careful. It sounded personal, protective, possessive. The entire kingdom noticed, including Celeste. She was sitting in the palace library when Marcus showed her. By the second sentence, her face felt warm. By the third sentence, she wanted to disappear. By the signature, she was smiling. A little. Only a little. Marcus noticed immediately. Interesting. Celeste closed the letter. What? You smiled. I did not. You absolutely did. She refused to answer. Marcus looked delighted. Across the room, Mrs. Hawthorne lowered her book. Leave her alone. Marcus looked offended. I am being supportive. You're being annoying. Also true. The librarian returned to reading. Marcus wandered off, still smiling. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, Vivienne sat in stunned silence. The king's response rested on the table before her. She had imagined many outcomes. An investigation, a hearing, perhaps even sympathy. She had not expected this, not remotely. The message felt less like a warning and more like a line drawn in stone. For the first time since the choosing ceremony, Vivienne realized something. She had not lost Celeste. She had lost against Leon, and that was a very different problem. Back in Ravenhold, night settled over the kingdom. The scandal slowly faded. The gossip moved on. The petition disappeared, yet one detail remained. One small detail people continued discussing long after everything else ended. Not the accusation, not the warning, not the threat. The way Leon had referred to Celeste. My Luna. 2 simple words. Yet somehow, they were all anyone remembered. 1 year later, spring arrived at Ravenhold wrapped in sunlight. The mountains had shed their winter snow. Wildflowers painted the valleys below the fortress, and for the first time in a very long time, the kingdom felt at peace. Not perfect, no kingdom ever was, but peaceful. The markets were thriving. The borders were secure. The packs stood united beneath the obsidian crown. Problems still appeared. They always would. The difference was that one man no longer carried them alone. At the center of Ravenhold, inside the office that had once buried Leon beneath endless responsibilities, a familiar argument was taking place. You need a break. I took one yesterday. No, you didn't. I looked out a window. Across the desk, Marcus stared in disbelief. That's not a break. It felt like one. Marcus looked ready to resign. Again. The office door opened. Both men looked up. Immediately, Leon's expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough. The hard edges softened, the tension eased, the king disappeared, leaving only Leon. Celeste stepped inside carrying a small basket. Several purple flowers peeked over the edge, freshly gathered. Her sketchbook rested beneath one arm. As usual, some things never changed. Thank the moon goddess for that. Marcus pointed accusingly. Tell him looking out a window isn't a break. Celeste considered the matter, then nodded. It isn't. Marcus looked victorious. Leon looked betrayed. The sight made her laugh. A real laugh. Warm, easy, the kind she rarely shared back in Ironvale. Because back then she had forgotten how. Now it came naturally. The kingdom had noticed. Leon certainly had. The Luna moved around the desk, then placed a flower beside his reports. A small blue blossom, one he recognized immediately. The northern ridge? She smiled. You remembered. Of course he remembered. Leon remembered everything she loved. The flowers, the herbs, the mountains, the sketchbook, the dreams she once thought impossible, especially those. Marcus watched the exchange, then stood. Right, nobody looked at him. I'll leave. Still nobody looked at him. Apparently I am interrupting. The door closed behind him. Neither noticed. Outside, Marcus smiled to himself. Inside, silence settled comfortably between husband and wife. The good kind, the kind built over time, over trust, over countless small moments. Leon finally set aside his reports. A miracle. Celeste looked impressed. I know. He sounded very proud of himself. You deserve a reward. A faint smile appeared. Dangerous thing to say. The smile she gave him in return felt like home. A year ago, neither of them would have believed this life. A year ago, Celeste had been the forgotten daughter, the overlooked daughter, the daughter nobody chose. Now servants smiled when she passed. Children ran to greet her. People trusted her, not because of her crown, because of who she was. The Luna had become exactly what she once said a Luna should be. Someone who listened, someone who protected, someone who made people feel safe. The realization would have embarrassed her. Fortunately, nobody mentioned it. A knock interrupted the moment. Mrs. Hawthorne entered carrying several books. The elderly librarian immediately noticed the flower, then noticed Leon, then noticed the report sitting untouched. Her eyes narrowed. You've escaped work. Leon looked offended. I've paused work. The librarian clearly didn't believe him. Nobody did anymore, not after Celeste joined Ravenhold, because somehow the future Luna had achieved the impossible. She had convinced the Supreme Alpha King to occasionally rest. The kingdom considered it one of her greatest accomplishments. Eventually the books were discussed. The flowers were discussed. A new greenhouse project was discussed. Life moved forward. Simple. Steady. Good. Later that evening, as the sun began to set beyond the mountains, Leon found Celeste in her favorite garden. Sketchbook open, pencil moving, flowers scattered around her. Some things truly never changed. He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Neither spoke immediately. The sunset painted the sky gold, beautiful, quiet, home. After a while, Leon's hand settled gently over hers. The sketch stopped. Celeste looked up. Blue eyes met hazel ones. A familiar warmth spread through her chest. Then Leon glanced down. She followed his gaze. His hand rested over hers, and beneath it, the slightest curve beneath her dress. Small, but there, real. The healers had confirmed it weeks ago. A pup. Their pup. For a moment, neither spoke. Words seemed too small. The wind moved through the garden. The flowers swayed gently. And somewhere beyond the walls of Ravenhold, the kingdom continued living its ordinary life. Protected, prosperous, strong, exactly as a king would hope. Leon looked toward the horizon, then back at his mate, his Luna, his home, the woman who had somehow changed everything, not through power, not through status, not through ambition, through kindness, through patience, through simply being herself. Celeste smiled softly, the same smile he had first seen in Ironvale, the one that had changed the course of his life. A year ago, she had dreamed of seeing the world, Now her sketches filled entire shelves. Flowers from every territory, plants from distant mountains. Her dream had survived, just as she had. The forgotten daughter was forgotten no longer, and perhaps that was the greatest victory of all. As the last light of day faded beyond Ravenhold, Leon pressed a kiss against her forehead. Celeste leaned into him, the future stretched before them, unknown, beautiful, the way all good futures should be. And beneath the first stars of evening, surrounded by flowers she loved and a family she never expected to have, Luna Celeste Massimo finally understood something. She had never needed the world to choose her. She had only needed one person to see her, and he had. Thank you so much for spending your time with this story. Every view, like, and comment helps more than you know. Now I'm curious. Where are you listening from? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to meet readers and listeners from all around the world.